It's been some time. Thank you all for joining, and thank you, Diana, for organizing and hosting this, and thank you to all who had to join us in, as Diana mentioned, quite unusual time. I think it would be just worth to know if people would want to let us in the chat know whether this is a good time as well. Diana mentioned that sometimes there are double figures. I don't know whether that's for earlier time, but if this works well for you, just let us know in the chat if you can. So we have around an hour or so, a bit more than an hour of chat with you about planned versioning today. So as you can see, I'll start with some introductions and a quick overview of what happened recently. But I don't think it will take 15 minutes, and we'll just move on to the planned versioning. We are revisiting this topic, I think, from almost 2 years ago, but for this year, Diana managed to plan it to be developed. So we want to gather the final thoughts, make sure that all is going to work well for you. And it's going to be a lovely brand new feature. Diana will talk about it more when and how we are envisioning this, but it's quite exciting. And then we'll have the discussion so we can gather your feedback and some summary at the end. So some latest developments. I'll just start temporarily back from my maternity leave. I just started last Monday. I'm saying temporarily because in 3 months' time, I'll be starting maternity leave number 2. Didn't wait too much between my 2 babies. So you will see some emails coming from me as well. And I'll be along Diana for these 3 months, but I'll be back then in April 2024, back to full-time. But just so you know, I'm just back for 3 months now. So quite a lot of things happened. Some of the things that sometimes you don't see at the front end, but is very important, changes to the infrastructure. Again, to me, it feels like, again, moving from Rails 5 that took forever, and we are just moving already to Rails 6.1. We organized already to have this this infrastructure update hopefully done for the 30th of January. We hope to stick to this, and we will be putting downtime on the tool, just so you know. It will be around 30 minutes, and the warning will be displayed on the homepage. But yeah, it shouldn't be too disruptive. We have done quite a lot of testing, so hopefully all will work well on that front. There are quite a lot of improvements, but Diana just mentioned there, for end user, there will be improvements to download, for example, include contributors. For administrators, you will be able to modify download settings. So when you download plan cover sheet, you will be able to switch it on and off. But I think most of the changes, and Diana and Glenys and Marta, please correct me, I think will be affecting the infrastructure and the backend, so it might be less visible to the rest of you. We are also planning to upgrade to Shibboleth and do a certificate renewal. So from what I understood, there have been some issues, and hopefully the single sign-on will work again okay. But let us know if there will be any issues. And I don't know how official I can be with this yet, but yes, there were interviews going on with Diana in the panel as well. And we managed, I hope it has been confirmed, but we managed to appoint a new developer that will be working alongside Glenys, Marta, and John Pinto. And hopefully they'll be starting mid-April. We try to do some negotiations for them to start with us earlier, but their old team is not willing to get rid of them for the upcoming 3 months. So it seems that in 3 months' time, they'll be starting just around the time I'll be probably going for my maternity leave number 2.
Magdalena, sorry to interrupt. Do you want to go in full screen?
Yeah.
Maybe easy for you?
So we have some upcoming events as well on the 20th of March at RDA in I'm not sure whether I pronounced it correctly, Juttenburg, I think it is, if I'm correct. And it's going to be in hybrid format, so it means some of us don't know exactly. Diana, is it you? Are you traveling there with Glenys? Are going to be there in person?
Yes, that's the plan.
Some of us will be able to join online. I don't know whether we already ran some hybrid event. For me, it will be the first time, so I hope it will all work well for us. But it's free to attend and you can register already. We are going to have a speaker from our DCC team, Joy Davidson, and hopefully we'll be able to see some of you there in person, and if not in person, at least in online format. So what are we going to do again? Just a recap. Liana will be taking over and she'll present you with what we were thinking about the plan versioning, some updates to it, have a discussion with you to see whether this is what you hope it to work like. And at the end, we'll offer with some summary. We'll be taking notes as we speak as well. So we'll share these with you, I think, as usual. And if you have any points, just drop them in the chat or feel free to unmute yourself.
As Magdalena said, we're revisiting an older issue that we've discussed before, has been bubbling around in the background, and we are keen to move on with it. This year we are planning our development work. Following the upgrades, we hope to do some development of features that you have requested. For plan versioning, we have given ourselves the optimistic deadline of 31st of August. We hope to achieve it, but at the same time, we feel that every time we try to move on with it, we end up asking ourselves too many questions, and I hope to show you why. What we discussed in November 2021, and then I'll come back, unfortunately, with more questions. I think it's important for us to discuss what exactly we expect from plan versioning before we actually launch into development. I hope you agree with me. Okay, so the quick recap. What you all asked for plan versioning, i.e. the ability to create a version of a plan. And most of you saw the version of a plan as a snapshot of the plan taken at a particular point in the lifespan of this plan. We didn't define this very well, apologies, which is why, in a way, we are coming back with more questions than answers. Some of you, and particularly administrative users, said that, for example, they would like a copy of the plan, a version of the plan, not a copy, sorry, before the feedback and after the feedback. End users haven't expressed a very clear wish. It's been more along the lines of, oh, I want to create, now that I've received the feedback, I want to create a new version and make sure that, you know, I compare the two versions of the plan and I make sure that I've added the feedback, something along those lines. But again, it's not very clearly defined. Our American collaborators have a different version, a different view of what a version should be. For them, they are keener on input from external systems, for example, DataSite. So when there are updates to a particular digital object identifier, it is fed into our system via an API. DataSite is just one example, but we can think of many more. And they think that it would be a good idea to create a new version of the plan. So, for example, the metadata changes, the collaborators, list of collaborators change. They would like a new version of the plan to be created at that point. Now, how we said versions can be created at that in November 2021, we thought that we can the system can generate versions automatically. For example, when the administrator clicks feedback complete, or when we receive changes to DOIs via from external systems. We also felt that users, the plan owner, should be able to create versions manually at various trigger points. For example, if they want to make a version of the plan public, they could create a new version and make it public and carry on working on a private working copy of their plan. That was one thought. And then, of course, they could be changing the plan on specific actions, save or download. When they download the version of the plan, the one that they submit, they could perhaps click download. At that point, they get prompted by the system, do you want to create a new version? And they say yes. I don't know, they may choose to say, this is the one I submitted to the Research Council. Okay, who can create versions? Again, we said that the plan owner obviously can create versions, the collaborators, and the organizational administrator after they give feedback, for example. I feel it's a bit too many ages, but we'll come back to that in a moment. Okay, we mentioned some trigger points that could generate a new version, where the user, the plan owner, can be prompted to generate a new version. So we have these trigger points were when project details were updated, when contributors are updated, a request, feedback returned, and so on. I think you can read them for yourselves here. There are quite a few trigger points, as you see. Again, we need to look into these, because the more trigger points there are, the more the more data is generated, potentially superfluous data. Okay, we then discussed how what changes would the end user see to their dashboard. These are very rough sketches, by the way. So user would access, I'll start with accessing and I'll end up with creating, because creating is the more difficult one. So how will the user access versions of a plan from the dashboard? They will essentially have plan A, plan B, plan C, and so on. And you probably know from the dashboard that there are actions available for each plan. And one of them would be version history. The user selects version history. They move on to viewing versions of a plan, a list that shows them versions of plan A. I'm sorry, this is very rough. Plan A, and each version has a version ID. The version ID would include the version, the plan ID as given by the system, plus a version ID. And if you remember, in November 2021, you also asked whether we would create URLs for version IDs, and I can't see why not. So people can actually circulate and share with each other a particular version of a plan rather than just a plan. It's doable, but just because it's doable doesn't mean we have to do it. In the version list, again, it's a simple list. You get your plan details, the version ID, the ability to download, who modified this version, when, and what action they performed. And then you get a list of actions. You can delete you can edit the version, you can delete it, you can I'm not sure restore is a good idea, but we can decide in the long term what actions should be in there. But the owner still has the option to read that version and then get rid of it if they don't think it's particularly useful. If they want to, for example, tidy up, they may have created too many versions for a project, sometimes for silly reasons. They can just go and say, I delete that one, I don't need that one. And now I'm coming back to the somewhat more contentious issue of creating new version. And I'll tell you why it's contentious. It should be easy. And in theory, it is. The user shouldn't see that many changes. If you look at this, they can go into their dashboard. We can add, view their plan A, B, C, D. And these are, by the way, it's my dashboard. And as you can see, I'm the one spamming you with a lot of test plans. Sorry about that. So we can go to add action, new version. At the moment we have copy, but we can, generate a new version of that particular plan. And then they would, of course, once they create a new version, they would go into edit mode. You know what the edit mode of a plan looks like. And from there, they would start on going all the way on to save. They can also create new versions on trigger points, as we said, for example, when they change visibility of the plan. We thought that this can be done via a pop-up window. So say somebody goes to edit their plan, they decide that they want to change the visibility, they get a prompt, they change visibility, and then they get a pop-up window that says, you can now create a new version. Do you want to do this? And they choose yes or no. Okay, cancel, whatever. The wording hasn't been decided yet. As I said, this is very rough. Now, because, and this is where it gets a bit harder, because there are too many agents creating a plan. There's the plan owner, there are the collaborators, there are there is the organizational administrator. I feel that the plan owner will need a warning that there are new versions available for a plan. And I guess we would have to have some kind of a bit more visible clue. You can possibly see in oh, sorry. I've put on the right-hand side of the screen, I've put new versions available in red for testing plan ownership, right? Sorry, this is my dashboard. Again, user would go into actions. If I go back a few slides and you see again what I mean by actions, they would select version history, and they will see the latest version of the plan or how many versions there are for the plans. I hope that so far it's clear how the workflow would be. We can take questions at the end, because I want to continue with what exactly is causing me problems. I can see that there are questions in the chat. We can stop and go through them at the discussion. I won't be long with this because I know that it's late for many of you, and we will try to keep it. We'll try to keep the whole event to 1 hour, and therefore I'll keep my presentation to a minimum. So the fundamental problem for creating new versions. We feel that there are too many triggers and prompts for a new version of a plan. Wanting to change the name of a plan, I don't think that should be a trigger for creating a new version. That's just not enough. We feel that perhaps for creating a new version of a plan, we should only enable these are major events within the system. We don't have to take every single snapshot we can take. Ideally, we should take snapshots at important points. So far, we haven't had many important points defined beyond before and after feedback. Or I want a version just because I want a version. I want a version just because I want a working version. And that's been roughly it. Another problem with creating new versions is that there are too many agents being able to create versions of a plan. In effect, the plan owner kind of loses ownership of the plan, right? Even if the plan is private rather than public, there are, collaborators can create a plan version and start working on it, but from which version? Any collaborator can go in and very helpfully say, log in into the system, edit their plan, very helpfully say, oh, my colleague has invited me to give some feedback on the plan. I'm going to go and create a new version and perhaps give them feedback on the plan. So that I don't mess with their key version, I'm going to create my own version. And this could happen, 2 collaborators could be doing this at the same time, plus the organizational administrator could be giving feedback at the same time. We don't know which version they started with. They could each be starting with different versions. And this could make it very difficult for the plan owner to reconcile the various changes. I mean, are we one question that went through my head is, do we do something like a working copy? How do we know which is the alpha copy? Do we impose that perhaps the collaborators start with the very latest version? We can do that too. The problem is that they might not want to. The plan owner may want, could you please give feedback on the first version, on this particular version? So I'm waiting for feedback from the organization and administrator. Don't give feedback on that one. So it is difficult. It becomes difficult to. It becomes difficult for the plan owner to own the plan. With too many people inputting feedback or being able to create versions of their plan. And as I said, there are automatic triggers for creating a new plan, including the changes in digital object identifiers, feedback from external systems. And these changes will mean that at all times we have to tell the plan owner, by the way, a new version has been created or new versions are available. There are just too many triggers. Even on the system, when you create the plan, you cannot create a new version. You cannot create a new version. It can appear far too many. This particular warning can appear too many times in the system or on their screen and interfere with the workflow if there are too many triggers within the plan that can generate a new version. So we need to boil down that number of triggers. We need to boil down the number of options and perhaps the number of agents that can generate a new version. If you remember, when we discussed this in November 2021, you might not remember, there was one important question for me, or it seemed important to me. One of the organizational administrators, I wish I could remember who, asked the question, can plan owners work without these versions? We said yes at the time, but the reality is that if there are automatically generated versions, chances are that might not happen. If collaborators can generate versions irrespective without the approval of the plan owner, that is not true. So if there is a desire for the plan owner to work and have complete ownership of the plan and work without versions, just continue to work on this particular version until it is complete, then what is being proposed makes this difficult. So it's create plan that has brought us back to you. And the key question, I think, is why do we need versions of plans in the first place? The only desire that I've heard is digital object identifier updates and before and after feedback. And from end users, I've heard the vague, I just want to have a copy of the version I've downloaded and submitted. But then I don't see why you need to generate a new version for that. Are you planning to have a working copy plus the copy you submitted? And I think these things these requests come because plan versioning means different things to different people. I asked an institutional administrator, what do you think about plan versioning? And she said, well, for me, the key stages in a project are the beginning of the project. In other words, the version of the plan that is submitted with the grant application. If the grant application is successful, then I need a plan throughout the lifetime of the project. And then a plan for the end of the project, for the user to come back and do something just before the end of the project. Well, I think in a way, templates with phases kind of do that. Not everybody likes phases in templates, we're aware of that. So we need to reconcile these things because we're offering far too many options and people can easily get confused. Are we asking for these plan versions because we don't have that magical end button that says this project is now complete, this is my final plan, end of project, this is your final and last version of a plan, and can we not do this with phases only? We also remember that we're also planning to introduce research outputs, and research outputs will encourage people to come back throughout the lifetime of a project and add data sets to a particular project, then we can get confused between data sets belonging to one project, one plan, and data sets added to another version of another plan. Now, I know that the plan is the same, but we don't want users to be confused between I'm editing this particular version of the plan, and here's where I'm adding all of my research outputs. It should be easy to keep track of that, but I just wanted to remind people that there are also the data sets in research outputs that are coming into play. Now, for users with administrative rights, the clearest desires I've heard expressed as a version of plan submitted before and after feedback, sorry to repeat myself. And there was one desire for perhaps the plan to be updated in case there are major changes to the grants, to the guidelines from the funder. So if the funder changes templates or introduces fundamental changes to their regulations and their template throughout the lifetime of a project, of a plan, then administrators would expect or would like to invite users to go back to update their plan in line with those changes. And they would like to see the plan before, a version of the plan after those changes were introduced. The other question I have here is, should collaborators be able to generate new versions? Why is this? I really think this is just too much. As I said, I'm concerned about the plan owner losing track of who's making changes to what version of the plan. I really think the plan owner should remain in charge of the whole exercise, be able to generate new versions or delete versions they didn't want to be created. And as it is, the plan owner is going to be faced with updates from external systems. And of course, this is perhaps a question more for us than for you, but I want to put it to you as well, because we need to all be aware of this. How do end users keep track of the latest version? It becomes a very important question. Do we want to create an alpha version, right? Do we want to create do we just simply go by the latest version, by the latest date? That may not necessarily be actually the best version, because it may not include feedback from all of the contributors or the organizational administrators. So there are just far too many options here, and we like to cut down on it. And the reason why we come back to you, it's not because we don't know what to do with the interface. It's just for you to help us redefine this and cut down on the number of options available. We just cannot offer that many options. Sorry, let me rephrase that. We can, technologically speaking, it's easily done. We can offer that many options. It's not a good idea because it puts a strain on the database, and we are generating a lot of unnecessary data. We can do it, but should we do it? And my answer to that is, at the moment, no. We could come back to you. We want to listen to you. We want you to put forward your ideas. And based on those ideas, we would come back to you with a proposal. And I think I can confidently say that proposal will be quite different from what we said in November 2021. We won't take into account, we won't put forward that many combinations and that many triggers. We will have to boil down the plan versioning facility to the essential, to what is actually needed. Okay, this is a discussion. I'm going to leave this on screen. Okay, let's see what is in the chat. Sorry, I can't see you.
Yeah, so there has been quite a lot of going on. I've been adding it into our notes as well. So
Gosh, yeah. Okay, so okay, let me see.
Diana, could
Yeah,
you
go
show
ahead.
the slide where the triggers were listed?
Sure. Okay, so let's go back to the triggers. Magdalena or Glenis, could one of you moderate the discussion, because I can't quite see because of my
Thanks.
slide who's lifting their hands. Who's talking just now?
that's Soil.
Oh, hey Soil, how are you doing? Hello. Okay.
Hi, thanks. I was I was just thinking what were these trigger points, so
Yeah,
thanks.
there are more. I mean, these are the key ones, but you know, there were more in the original proposal.
We have a few important key points made in the comments, which is really good to know. If anyone else would like to elaborate further or add anything else, please go ahead.
Okay, so I'll start with, I think the first comment on this was from Mark Brunel, and said a pop-up should also indicate whether changes will be saved anyway, regardless of whether you create a new version, perhaps. Yeah, so that becomes, complicated, because am I saving the changes? Am I saving the changes, or am I saving a new version? And if I choose not to save it to a new version, is the owner worried that I'm not saving the actual changes? Yeah, that makes it a bit more complicated. So thanks for that, Mark. Would a new version also create a new version on the meta level? When is a new version created? And does that happen on both levels in parallel, so to speak? Can I ask one of our developers to comment on the meta level? Hello, Marta, John, Gladys.
Hi. So you refer as in the metadata in the actual database regarding that particular plan. Sorry, I don't know who asked the question. Was it Mark?
It's
was
Mark,
me,
yeah.
was me
Yes.
who asked the question about the meta level. And it originates from the fact that there are two APIs where you can, through one API, you can download the actual plan. While through the other API, you can basically download the metadata of the plan. So would a new version affect both?
Well, we would need to make sure that it would be kind of mirrored to both. I would say yes. Glenys?
Yes, I agree, Marta, that it would be reflected on both. Yes.
Yeah, we would need to update both APIs in order to display that.
Okay. Danny, a very wise comment. Maybe start simple, but go from there to elaborate upon. If you try to encompass every situation for version control, it may be a never-ending story. Important trigger for me would be when I, as admin, review the plan. And preferably that version cannot be deleted by the owner. And the owner can decide whether something needs a new version. Yeah, so there's definitely the desire from administrators to create a new version of the plan when you submit feedback. At the moment, the feedback goes into the comment session. Would it not perhaps be better to improve the feedback by perhaps I'm thinking aloud, sorry. So at the moment, the feedback goes into the comment session. If the organizational administrator provides feedback on the plan, it doesn't overwrite in any way the answers of the user. Why is this desire to have the plan after feedback, a version of the plan after feedback? Danny?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, yeah.
At the moment, admins and people higher ups, information security officers, privacy officers, etc. They don't have a traceback on the comments that were given for a data management plan. So with that versioning, I would hope that the version also retains the comments that were made when a review was completed. So that there's always for people a traceback to say, well, we advised you to do this, or we recommended you to do this, or something that needed to be changed, something like that. So for me, when review is completed, button is clicked, that would be an important trigger point for me for a version. And for me, I would naturally assume that the primary owner of a data management plan is in charge of determining whether adjustments made, as in answers given, should be converted to a new version. I think that would, quote unquote, be the simple, easy solution. And then in the future, start building on more use cases that the community starts giving in for other trigger points, maybe.
That's grand. Before I go into further comments, I see Lindsay Darling has raised her hand. Lindsay, do you want to go ahead?
Yeah, I think I'm relatively new to this, so I could be completely oversimplifying this, but it seems to me that there's a distinction to be made between notification of changes being made and new versions being triggered. And I think a lot of the things that administrators are looking for are actually notifications that changes have been made, so that comments have been addressed, changes have been made, things have been edited. And I wonder if two things, and Danny touched on it there. First of all, notifications that changes have been made, that would be important. And then that the owner of the plan determines what triggers a new version. Now, whether they do that if and when it comes up, if and when changes are being made, and it's done at each point, or perhaps an element of building your plan is that the user selects their own trigger points. So does the user select their trigger points? Can an administrator at an institutional level select their trigger points? Can it be more of a menu, or does it have to be a one size fits all?
We are keener on a one size fits all, because if you provide a menu, people will use it in different ways, and I really feel that we would generate a lot of data. We want to propose the solutions that we want to propose. Ideally, should be something that works for something simple that generates something acceptable for everybody.
Well, I think if that's the case, then there's a really big part around user training, because people, if it's a one size fits all, and I by the way, I agree with you. I think a one size fits all is probably the way to go, but then people are going to have to adjust how they work based on what the model is. So there has to be a training piece, because otherwise people will end up trying to co-opt how they work now onto the system, and it's not going to work for either end. So I think that has to be considered within it.
You mean user training ideally for both organizational administrators and end user? Yeah.
Because if it's, I think essentially what you're going to have to ask people to do is adjust the way they work, or you're going to end up with a lot of versions for very minor things. And there's going to be duplicates, yeah.
Which is why we don't want to add that many trigger points.
Mark has sent up.
Just one question about the versioning.
Yeah.
What would versioning actually mean if you build in a trigger point that creates a new version? Does that automatically mean that the older version or versions are no longer editable, changeable?
No.
Is that what you're? Because
no, we haven't even proposed that.
Things,
no.
I think, if that doesn't happen.
I don't think we've even proposed that. No.
Okay.
you will have a menu of versions. If we could look into it, we'll have a menu of versions. Where is my plan? Okay, and each of these versions, just a moment because I can't quite see, I've got too many things on my screen, and each version would essentially have its actions. Do you see them? That could be performed.
Okay.
So
in my view, I'm not sure if everybody will agree. I'm just bringing my view forward. I think it would complicate things if the older versions would also be changeable. I think a traceback is fine, but you might get confusion on which is the latest version if you start editing a prior version and then you submit it again for review. Which version are you reviewing?
Yeah. And as I said, it's difficult to establish which is the latest version, precisely because you invite people, including your collaborators, and you've submitted the plan for feedback, and they're all working on it at the same time. If we make the latest submission the latest version, we could be missing the version with feedback. I mean, we can work around that. I'm sure we can look into this, but you can see what I'm trying to say. It's yeah, Magdalena, you have your hand up. Marta, sorry.
Yeah, I was gonna mention that in a way, Mark kind of pick up a good point. Is then you're gonna end up having multiple plans or one plan with multiple plans. So it's actually a good point. Thank you for pointing that one out. And we'll make sure that we kind of have a think on that. Thanks. Okay.
Right. Can I just go through the chat again? Is anybody with a hand up? I don't see anybody. Okay. So the versions I like to have is the submitted version. We encourage living document DMPs, but it can be important to know what you said to the funding bodies originally. Okay. So this is Beth, Montague, Helen. So the version you like to have is the submitted version. So that would be your alpha version, yeah? Beth, maybe you can unmute yourself. All right. Maybe Beth can hear me. No worries. Okay, so but that is a very good point. The submitted version is the one that really stands and on the basis of which you may get your grant, right? It may not be the latest version in your system, but it could be the version that actually counts the most. Yeah. Mark, could it be a flag with a plan indicating whether you want versioning to be possible for a plan? Yeah, it could be. I mean, those I presume, Mark, you're referring to the warnings about new versions be available. I think the screenshots I've done are fairly rough, but yeah, I guess we can do that.
Well, not exactly what I meant.
All right, sorry. What did you mean?
What I meant was basically that you have the choice whether versioning will happen with a plan, not that a trigger pops up, but whether you actually want versioning to be happening with a plan. So then you have the choice whether the triggers happen or not. I don't know if that would be an idea for those that don't want the versioning to complicate things. But it could also be that the researcher doesn't want it to be too complicated and says, okay, I'm not working with versioning. I don't want all these triggers. I'll work in my own way and I'll keep the versions and export them. I don't know how researchers would view the triggers and all the versioning.
Mm-hmm. And you also don't think that adding comments while doing a review should trigger automatically a new version. So you're
no, it's basically if you do a review, that's fine, and I hope the researcher takes the comments to heart. But only after the review has been done, and somebody, let's say, the date after the review. When somebody starts working again on the plan, that could trigger a new version.
Okay.
but not adding the comments on it by itself.
Right. Okay. So when the user has looked at the comments, done the feedback, taken the feedback into account, there needs to be some kind of indication that they've done that, and that's the stage where perhaps there should be a new version, if there is a new version. Yeah.
Yeah, if that
After the feedback. Yeah,
wants
okay.
that.
Which doesn't really conflict with what Danny said, because Danny essentially said the same thing. You don't appear to be too concerned about new versions as such as about keeping track of the fact that the comments have been incorporated into the into the submitted version, right? That's what you worry about.
Yeah, that's exactly.
For me, I'm not really concerned whether they incorporated it.
Sorry, who's talking?
Sorry, Danny. This is Danny
yeah.
again.
Yeah.
For me, I'm not really concerned whether they have incorporated the comments. I hope they do. For me as an admin and from privacy officers and information security officers, it's the traceback of the comments that have been made and the advice that have been made that is also important.
So the traceback, keeping track of them, right? Okay.
Yeah, keeping track. Well, not just that we as admins have a version available that showcases that contains our comments that we made to the researcher. So that if we, for example, have an audit and something went wrong in a research or there was a major data breach, that we can always go back to, well, this is the data management plan. We reviewed this data management plan and we took into account any inconsistencies as shown, for example, in these comments that we made to them. And of course, other emails that we would raise to them. So that's for me an important one. And in general, we recommend researchers to use versioning, and I added in the chat what we try to indicate to researchers in terms of versioning their data management plan. But yeah, that was it.
I'll follow you up. This Joachim is keeping his hand up. I'll follow up with this because you said you encourage users to use versioning, but I don't know how you do that at the moment. In any case, it's more of an auditing thing for you, right?
Yes, and also good practices.
Okay. Joachim?
Yes, just a follow-up to what Danny just said. Could one idea, a simple idea, be just to, I mean, now you cannot download the comments in any way, as far as I can see, either via the API or, but if you made the comments downloadable, at least via the API, and every admin could make a routine to, after commenting, download the DMP as it is right then. So and keep this copy to have it as, and you wouldn't have to involve versioning of the comments.
Right.
So that's just an idea. Otherwise, I agree with much that has been said about, I mean, you have versioning now for templates, right? Yeah. And I agree with that. It should, if we have versioning of DMPs, it should not be too many triggers. And in fact, I think there are too many changes, smaller changes of templates that triggers a new version right now. Mm-hmm. So I'd like to reduce that. For example, if you make a change in the guidance that is inherent, that triggers also new versions. Mm-hmm. So keep it simple and start like someone who suggested, just keep it simple from the start, and maybe it will grow to something that is more balanced afterwards.
That's true. We have versioning for templates, but it works somewhat differently. there aren't that many people contributing to that. So there's one owner of that template making changes, right? And if you like, there's an audit there. This owner is always in charge of the template.
Yeah,
Whereas
and
what we're proposing for plan.
Yeah, I agree with what you said. I think only the owner of the plan should be able to create new versions also.
Yeah, Lindsay, thanks so much, Lindsay.
Hi there. I'm just wondering whether this is really an oversimplification, but I'm just wondering when a researcher asks for feedback on their data management plan and you provide comments, whether the comments could be locked so they can't be deleted by the researcher. I'm just wondering whether that will provide a solution for administrators that want to look back at the history of comments that have been made.
All right.
Yeah.
Okay, we 55. We got 5 minutes left. I had kept this meeting to no, actually no. I did say 1 hour and a half. Sorry. So I apologize. For a moment, I was worrying that we're running late. Lindsay, so that's a good idea. Who agrees with Lindsay about locking the comments? Because I think it essentially comes back to this keeping track of the comments, auditing that these comments, you made these comments, the user, but you know, everybody wants to see that these comments were made and kept. Yeah.
For me, Danny again, it would probably. I don't know how it works out when people start changing the answers to questions, because then the comments don't reflect the answers anymore. So then you may have a comment that is locked for which people don't understand what the initial answer was that the comment was about.
Yeah, but possibly comment with a timestamp that would differentiate the answer. So if you see a comment with an older date, then the change had been made by the user, that would differentiate.
For me, I would want to know why I made that comment and what the original answer was that elicited the necessity for that comment to be made.
Ah, okay, that's a good point.
So otherwise you have maybe a beautiful answer, and then you have a comment, even when it is a data stamp, that's completely not.
Would it help? Would it help if possibly the comments could be just edited by the administrators and they could not be deleted or removed or edited by the owners of the plan?
Well, that still doesn't solve the problem of the answers to questions being changed by a user.
Well, yeah, so that's the issue. The issue is, so what Danny is saying, the comments, so the plan owner wrote a plan, submitted it for feedback. The administrator gave feedback based on those answers. Then based on the feedback, the plan owner changes the questions that they made. So the comments and the comments are not linked to the original answers to this question any longer. So I guess that this is why we had the request for plan versioning in the first place, because the comments and the answers are not divorced because the plan owner has changed them. Sorry if I made this too long, but do you see what I mean?
Yeah, but
exactly.
one thing that then makes that comment is no longer a valid comment. So what's the point on keeping that comment? So it would be makes more sense
for auditing, Marta, for auditing. Yeah. So we want to keep that comment for auditing.
Yeah, but the key point here is that the answer actually represents what the comment was asking for. So if the plan owner didn't make the changes according to the comment, then the owner of the comment, so the administrator, can come in and make a comment saying this is not what we suggested, or it can complete that. So I would say that one thing that was mentioned is that the owner of the plan can delete the comments or change the comments. Then I would say that should probably be changed in a way that who can change and controls that comment is the person who makes the comment in the first place. So I'm assuming the user submits the plan, comes back with feedback, changes based on the feedback their answers. Then what could happen is there will be, I'm assuming there's a review at that point to make sure that the first bit was done properly. If that's the case, then the person can delete the comments and the comment is no longer valid, it's no longer worth keeping. Because keeping a bad response of a plan or a bad answer from a plan it's a waste.
Marta, I think we're making this too long. Okay, sorry about this. I know what you're saying. You have your point too, but what administrators are asking for is a trail of changes, keeping track of changes, an auditing trail. I received this plan based on these answers. I made these comments, and here's the plan that was submitted. Were my comments, some organizational administrators say, I don't care if they didn't take into account my comments, it's their problem. Okay, but I want to be able to find on the system the original answers and the comments I made, right? Some administrators are a bit more protective and they say, you know, I do care whether they took my comments into account or not, okay? And I still want to see the original answers to which I made these comments. Either way, both administrators want the same thing. They want to see the comment and the original answers. I think that is the issue. And at the moment, our system doesn't provide that. Chris?
Hi, Anna, thank you. I think Danny makes a good point, and I'm wondering, thinking about possible solutions.
Yeah.
If a researcher submits a feedback request, is that something that could trigger a version? That way, when an admin has finished doing the review, that they could then generate another version. So that means that when the feedback request triggers a version, you have the original plan, the issues, and then you're also capturing the admin's comment at the end of the review. So the two will match up. You can see what comments have been input to a particular version of a plan. Sorry, I've not expressed that too great.
No, I know what you mean. It's a matter at which point we trigger this version, and that's something that we need to think about. Yeah. Because, for example, I think Mark thought that it should be done after. You think perhaps the version should be triggered before or when the plan owner submits for request. So that's something we need to think about. Or it could be that we fix the feedback process altogether. And we change the interface there as well. It will probably be bigger work, but we also have that on our agenda, looking at the feedback process and how it works. Yeah, it could be that the feedback process, rather than being comments, it's more similar. No, because if it's similar to the words track changes facility, for example, that's the best example I could come up with. The user can accept, reject changes, and you lose track of them altogether. Sorry.
Yeah, I've just thought of one other potential issue. Yeah. You know, there is an assumption around how long does it take once a feedback request is sent before the review comes in? Might there be other changes to the plan in between? So I'm thinking out of the box. I'm not saying this is the right way necessarily to go about it, but one option there might be for a reviewer to trigger a version at the start of the review. They then do the review and then they create a second version at the end of the process, but there you're relying on humans remembering to do that rather than automating it in the system.
Yeah, another thing to do is to lock the plan. that's come before. So while the plan is due for, it's sent for review and it's in the review process, we could lock it and no changes can be made. Sorry, you're waiting for review. Now you can't do anything to your plan. It's not the ideal solution. People probably moan about that as well, but it's something that can be done so that you do not crossing changes to the plan while the reviewer provides feedback. How do you feel about that?
I think we need a vote on that one.
We use a storage platform, which is called Yoda. And there people can also submit data to a certain section of Yoda and even publish data. During the submittal process, as long as there's no review done or a decision made, for example, accept or reject in this case, the data is indeed locked. So my preference would indeed be if somebody sends their data management plan for review, that it is temporarily locked until the reviewer clicks on the review complete button.
Yeah, I think it could just trigger a message for the user possibly saying, are you sure you want to send for review? Please be aware it will be locked for X amount of time. Go ahead, yes, no. I think it'll be simple as that.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, thanks, Magdalena. That would be actually a good thing to start with. Okay, I'm going to go through your comments. Mark, you've got your hand up. Is this a new comment or is this from your earlier?
It's a comment about the locking of the DMPs if you request a review. That's, I think, a good idea. Would it also be an idea to say, okay, well, the researcher is waiting too long for the review for whatever reason, and can basically say, okay, I retract my request for a review. I need to edit my plan in the meantime, and I'll redo the request later. And then it could also trigger the new version, but it also could also trigger a warning to maybe that the old version that still exists, but it should lock the new version, the old version, and maybe add a comment, okay, there's a new version for the one that does the review and goes to the old version. But that also ties into a second point about this that I had in mind. If a new version is created, does that mean there's a new ID for the an identifier for the same plan within the system? Does that generate a new ID?
It generates, so the plan will have the same ID with version something. Okay, so you have, we did say that we would generate a new, each version would have its own ID, but the plan ID will remain the same on the system.
Okay, so it would be a 1A, 1B, so to speak.
Yes, something like that. Yeah.
So, and that would also not affect the statistics part, because basically how many plans you have may now be how many versions are there.
Yeah, yeah. So we have to be very careful with that. Yeah. Okay, I'm going to go very quickly through your comments.
Sorry, Mark had his hand up. I don't know, Mark, you just put it down.
I just made my comment.
Oh,
okay. Cheers. Okay. For any single comment made in any section of the DMP. Okay, so that's again another point about too many triggers. This is Chris thanking Danny for. Okay, so the Chris is putting forward a suggestion of a batch of comments, but I think it's the same, something that we've discussed so far, unless I'm misunderstanding you, Chris. I agree with Mark that older versions should be locked from changes. This is from Christopher Tibbs. No, that's a point that we've gone through so far. We would really like completing the comments to act as a trigger. So that this keeps coming up time and time again. So it's around feedback as far as org admins is concerned, really. I think this is the the problem. And I think you've given us very valuable input here. It could be that also fixing the feedback workflow may altogether get rid of this versioning issue. We can go back to the end user and ask, do you really need versions? And if so, what for? And it could be that we come back with a better workflow around feedback rather than plan versioning. So Bev John says the same. Yes, it's about auditing. Versioning should work in the background, so they shouldn't be in the way to most users. They should always work on the latest version. Yeah. I was just typing that. Bev Jones, could the plan be temporarily locked while submitted? Ben, I've only just come in. Bev, I've only just coming around to your comments. We've already discussed this. So I don't know how you feel. Do you feel that perhaps an improved feedback process together with at most a before and after plan version is perhaps the answer so far? Because I don't think we need more versions than that. What do you think? I don't know, shall I prompt somebody? Bev, are you still around?
Yes.
Hi.
Yes, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Right.
What do you think?
I think if we can see the version that was commented on, and if a researcher can see the version that they submitted in some way, then, so for example, if they can, and I mean, they can save the document they sent to a funder.
Yeah.
But it would be quite nice to have a way to have that kind of set into the system. Then that would be, that's what we need. I'd love the locking, because I mean, we have a KPI of 3 days, for 3 working days for comments. We're normally well below that. But I work with a colleague, and Helen and I, we quite often discuss things, and I'll make some notes on a plan, and then I'll go to her and say, I wondered what you thought about this. And then of course we open it and they've changed it. So, you know, it would be quite nice for them to, I mean, it's good that they're developing it, but if they were encouraged in some way, if there was some kind of hard block that it said, look, you know, you won't be able to make changes for a day or 2, that would be useful to us.
Yeah, that sounds good. I'm stop sharing my screen because I hate not seeing your faces. Okay, I mean,
Diana, can I ask something?
Yeah.
How do people, so for what I'm trying to understand, there's not really a need to edit if we're looking at versions, no one is actually thinking in editing old versions, if per se, correct? So would like a screen, if we're thinking of a screenshot, even if it's a PDF of the version in that particular time, would that something that would make sense to you to be able to see a PDF version of the plan on that particular point with obviously comments attached with the questions? Or do you actually would like the functionality? Because there's a big difference between having a screenshot of a version than actually making that version edited. I would like to kind of get the feeling from the group from that, if it's all right.
I don't quite understand the question. You mean keep a version of the plan before feedback, but that version is still editable?
No, the opposite actually, Diana. So when you create a new version, the old version is no longer editable. So
right.
all I'm asking is people looking for to actually edit an old version, or they are just no? So
ideally not. So what's come out of this meeting that ideally not?
That's what I was asking the group. If that's the feeling, would have something like a PDF of the plan and that particular, the old version would be useful to have instead of editing.
That's what's been said, yeah.
Hi, my name is Mark again.
Hi, Mark.
Sorry about the frequent.
No.
It's okay. It's okay.
I would have prefer a locked version, that the old version cannot be changed, but I would not like the PDF version option, because basically what we try to do is create using the APIs is download the original files and keep them as in a register to make sure we have an idea of what the plans are and how they change over time, specifically where it involves sensitive research. So PDF versions would not really help us in this sense, because we like the JSON versions.
To be honest, when I said PDF, I'm just thinking of a static, not editing kind of version. So I'm thinking database wise. Sorry, that's just my brain thinking of what I need. But yeah, no, okay, I understand and I see your point as well. So you want to be able to still retrieve the data, but not changeable. Yeah, cool.
Yeah,
Thank
exactly.
you. That's why I was asking. Thank you.
Okay, I think we got a good feel of what you actually want, and I'm sorry, but we'll keep coming back about this to the point of being pests when we sit down and start developing, and I still come back with more questions. I apologize about this, but it's important to get it right, because if we introduce a new feature like this, it needs to work. It can be improved in time, but if we introduce the wrong thing from the beginning, it will cause us a lot of pain. So I'll come back with more questions. Anybody else has anything else to add?
Maybe a question in the sense of how the APIs work. Would that change how you retrieve the data on the DMPs through either API version 1 or version 0? Because if you retrieve a plan, do you need to add something to be sure to get either all the versions or a specific version?
I'm assuming that the solution to that would actually, say, for example, the current call that you have, it would still work and we would provide the latest version, if that makes sense, because that's the one being edited. But in addition to that, we would have to create an additional kind of call where you would be able to retrieve the rest of the versions, if that was the case, if that makes sense. So the current call would still deliver your version, your latest version, but then we would have to create a new call to get you the old versions, if that would be the point. Does that answer?
So far for me, it's not really necessary. I was just wondering how it would work.
It might be something we come back. To be honest, when we start doing the implementation, the API will be the last bit of it.
Of course.
So we can come back and kind of have a discussion about what kind of APIs people would be looking for.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, we'll do whatever works for you. I feel as if we've quieted down. There are no more questions coming, and if there are, please always contact us at the help desk. So I think I'm going to stop the presentation and discussion on versioning. Magdalena, you may want to do a quick summary, so I'll hand over to you and go quiet.
Thank you. Thanks, Diana. I didn't do a presentation for a summary because it was just all going to depend on our discussion today, and so many points came through. The summary as we speak might be quite difficult for me to do, but there will be better summary hopefully coming also after this call. Very admin point. I made quickly a survey where you can just participate to let us know whether mornings or afternoons are better for you. And we'll also share this with the whole DMPonline list, so it's not limited to 22 opinions of people that are joining just right now, but we want to find out whether mornings or evenings are better. But more from the discussion, one more admin point. We'll share, as usual, the notes and PowerPoint presentation with you after the meeting. But more broader summary, there is a worry that there are currently, we proposed too many versions to be created in the system. And so Diana was trying to go through these and find out how we could cut the amount of trigger points. And through the discussions, it seems that possibly even changing the way the feedback is being created could be more helpful for many of you. So possibly just revisiting this, and we'll probably sit down with Diana and developers at a later stage. It might be that just reviewing the feedback process and adding a trigger point where when the researcher hits this for review, there'll be a warning saying your plan will be locked until the review or comments have been added. That could help you with the versions. I'm not sure how much versions are then helpful for the users. If this, I think in priority we tend to have now the administrators, but we want to make sure we work well for the researchers. But I don't think the researchers would think as much about the versions as long as they always have the last ones. So this is something for us to take on board and think of, and think whether we still need to do major rework to the versions. And like I said, and there was quite a lot of discussion about the feedback process and locking it, and maybe also just to have very clear roles about who can create new versions, and rather than having the owners and collaborators and administrators, just locking it to the owner and administrator. So again, it's just less people being able to do changes if we decide finally going ahead with the versioning. And ensuring that also the comments would be downloadable for you as administrators, because it's currently not possible, and it again seems it could be a workaround the versions. I'm not sure. I'll need to really think about this with Diana after this meeting, and see whether we would still need some sort of more of a basic creation of versioning, or whether we would just create some new feedback process or go ahead with both, but just really cutting down on the triggers, because like many of you also mentioned, maybe some of the things we thought of before, like just adding a collaborator, doesn't need to actually create a new version, because the user doesn't need to, they see it straight away when they added a new collaborator. Maybe that doesn't require a new version. So I think in summary, that sums it up all. But like I said, we'll share the video recording and we'll share the survey and PowerPoint presentations after the meeting. I would like to say a big thank you to Diana again for organizing and revisiting. To all of you for joining us in the afternoon and quite late. Most of you might be already heading home, or just having the end of their working day, if not already. So many thanks for participating, and we hope to see many of you in March, either in person or online. And Diana is just adding one more comment here. Diana, do you want to add anything? Yeah.
Oh no, it was just what you said. There was, Mark added an extra field here that will provide links to recording. We'll put your comments and a summary on the living agenda too. And Mark just added, just as they're about to go home, an extra field might be useful at the method level for a DMP, indicating how many versions there are, if interesting.
Okay. Well, we'll take all your comments and we'll share the findings after we have a chance to process everything with Diana and later on with the developers, and let you know what are our thoughts on going ahead. Brilliant. So thank you all, and we hope to see you soon in March.